Welcome back to another episode. My name is Lenny Joseph. I'm the founder of KLPD and Greenole, and also have a significant, I'll say, activity and stuff that I do with Bidtracer. And I'm here with Professor Adolfo from the University of Brasilia. So we're continuing from our previous conversations, and I think what we did in the previous two, we talked about our histories. We talked about the history of automation, building automation, and how it has formed, and how some of those things that used to be so-called old is now coming back into being new again. So one of the things that I wanted to bring up, and I want us to have a discussion around, is I have this perspective about buildings, and the perspective I have is buildings were always built to be shelters, to house people, whether it's for an office, for whatever it is, right? And over the past 3 decades, you've had this influx of technology, influx of computers, and we've got our society improving technologically significantly. So if you had gone into a building, say 50 years ago, 40 years ago, there was literally nothing smart. There was no technology. It was just your lights, you turn on the light switch, you have the TV. I think the most advanced thing that you had was maybe the remote control of the TV, and that only came later on, right? So I have seen this evolution, and I would love to get your perspective on how you've seen this technology infusion into buildings as a whole.
Yes, I understand, and I also see there's a lot of different approaches. And I think the central point today for building automation for offices is the comfort, thermal comfort, visual comfort. And that is not the point that you have now measures how, for example, as predicted mean load, it's a norm, ISO 7730. Yeah. And they use then the temperature, the humidity, air velocity, radiation, the cloth you are using, activity you are carrying on. And the point is, if you have comfort, you are more productive. The idea for if you are in an environment and you are sweating, you cannot think right. You cannot type, you cannot program. If you have too high air velocity, you cannot work. So there is a limit of 0.5 meters per second for the air conditioning. Otherwise, the people is always thinking, oh, this cold over my head is not comfortable. And at the same way, the visual comfort. So we have the circadian cycle, that in the morning you have more yellow sun, and it is at midday you have white sunlight. And you have then in the evening also more reddish light. Right. And this makes us to feel comfort if you have this inside. If the lights can adapt the color, and you have then the option to measure the light intensity, lux. And so the people, when they are starting the morning, they feel comfortable, they are more productive. At the lunchtime, they are comfortable because they expect that outside is the same light. So the idea is that the persons, the people that are working, feel comfortable in the environment, not too noisy, not too bright light, not too windy of the air conditioning. So using do-table air conditioning to spread. So the idea is that we have then an architecture from the how make people feel comfortable, because then they are more productive. This is so to say. It's not because we like the people, but because we need them productive. And the people also like to be productive. They don't like to go to offices. They sit there for hours and cannot think. And so the building automation has the aspect of security, of access, and of other issues. But from the point of view of the people, they like to feel comfortable. And for example, for my experience, the worst place is a cinema. A cinema is always too cold in Brazil. They put the air conditioning at 18 degrees and they think, oh, we have power, so we can do 18. And I'm freezing all the time. And the people, because the comfort temperature in Brazil is still 23.5 degrees. Okay. This is for summer.
Yeah.
In the winter, 23.5. And the people, all places you go, you see they put the air conditioning 18 because they think it's better because I can. And I say it's not better. All people are, and so the main purpose of building automation, I think today, is comfort. It's really comfort, thermal, noise comfort, and so, illumination.
I find this conversation really interesting, right? And I'll tell you why. Because I've said for a very long time, and I think we had it in the previous episode where we talked about the previous podcast, where we talked about how the person that pays for the building to be built, the person that is a contractor, and he doesn't want to pay too much money, he just wants to build it and go. But meanwhile, the person that has to live in the building and use the building is someone else, and he pays the bills associated with energy and everything else, right? And the actual statistics, the actual numbers is, what you spend in building a building, you spend 5 times that, 4 to 5 times that in the running of the building. Mm-hmm. So if you build a building for $1 billion, over the lifetime of the building, and if you consider lifetime 15, 20 years, you will spend 5 times that in running the building. Now, and you made a very important point earlier on, that the person paying that bill is not the same person that pays for living in the building. And that is from a building standpoint. Now, when you put in the other dimension that you talked about, which is the people productivity, the losses are so much more, right? So, because it's not just the operation of the building, it's the operation of the people and what those people can produce while they're in there. So when we're talking about buildings and we talk about the productivity of the individuals, I'll use a simple example. Simple example might be a doctor that sees patients, right? And if the environment is comfortable for himself and the nurses and patients are coming in, he might be able to see, say, 10 patients a day. I'm just using a number, 10 patients a day. If the building is not comfortable, he might only see 7 or 8. Because not only is he having to deal with the room not being comfortable, the patients that are coming in is not comfortable, they're looking to have somebody to come fix it, they're looking to adjust things, and just in general, right? So the total cost of utilization for a building is significant based on how well you utilize the technology that is there and how well you can make it function, right?
Yes. I think I have seen in Karlsruhe in 2022, when I was there as a postdoc, they installed in our rooms tables that move up and down. So the people can stand for 5 minutes, and then, because if you sit for 4 hours, it's not good for your health. Right. And so they installed all these moving tables. Here in Brazil, I had never seen this, but there I think it's sometimes a wave. They try to make this, but I find it very good for my back, and so. But it's always a matter of cost. It's not for free. You have a table with automation. It's, so to say, when you have windows that open and close, and you have then a breeze that shut the sun. All this is automation that is possible. And then I like to say another thought, because automation, for example, in an office you have, for example, 20 people working. if you allow to one people to change the air conditioning, this will be hell,
right?
Because everybody will change. And so the only way you have everybody because this predictive mean will hold means that the most of the people, always you have 5% of people that are not satisfied, but the most of the people are comfortable if you follow this predictive mean vote. And this is the same situation in our home. I like more light, my wife no so much light, and it's true. If you ask people, you cannot. A student once said to me, "You know, Adolfo, the best way to go to hell is to try to satisfy everybody." It's not possible. So we have to live with this some degree of unsatisfied.
Yeah. And one of the things that occurred to me, particularly when it comes to people productivity and everything else, is the fact that if you can tie everything onto a single pane of glass, so to speak, and then use it for compliance and regulatory needs, and at the same time do the averages, right? Because you're not going to satisfy everybody. So if you can understand what are the optimal stages, right? So if 23 degrees or 23.5 centigrade is the optimal stuff, if you can deliver that level of comfort, but it's not just that level of comfort, because we as human beings, we have 5-6 senses, right? So it's not just the air, it's also the noise level, it's also our eyes as we look at the light intensity, if it's healthy. So the smells, it's a whole bunch of things. It's also the conveniences of other things that you need around you, right? And it was the basis of how we went down the path with Greenole. So with Greenole, what we did is we've created this platform that ties parameters, just parameters in the building, right? And the parameters go beyond the typical building management control systems. It goes to literally everything, because when I say everything that can communicate, or everything that has the potential to communicate. And if you think about a building, the only things that either consume energy, because when you're consuming energy, you have some connectivity to it, or something that delivers energy, and then you also have connectivity to it, is either a mechanical device or an electrical device. So a wall doesn't communicate unless you put a sensor on it. If you put a sensor on it, now you've got an electrical device, right? But until that point, it doesn't. So once you're able to capture all the devices that could potentially communicate, then you have a basis to start working with a digital building. And what has happened over the past few years is the level of technology and digitization has gone so high. I remember when we had pneumatic systems and we did DDC systems for controls in a building, that was literally 90% of the technology that was in the building, right? But now the control system is maybe 10%. You have so many things that communicate, including the coffee machine that's got a Bluetooth connection, and the printer, and people don't even use printing anymore, and literally everything else that is there. And it consumes so much energy. People do not realize that a building 40 years ago, the only energy it consumed were the lights. Some buildings didn't even have HVAC systems. And if you're not there and you turned off the light, zero energy consumption.
Yes.
Yes,
we have a project at the University of Brasilia where André is working. It's Lab Zero. It's a building that generates its own energy. It's zero energy building. So you have then solar cells on the roof, and you have 4 different air conditioning techniques that are implemented. And this was a laboratory that was built to show energy efficiency. And the highest efficiency would be zero consumption.
Right.
And so the point is, in the evening, we have no solars we have no sun, and so we need to use the energy from the power grid from Brazil.
Right.
Because the other way would be to use batteries. But batteries is the worst solution because it's so complicated.
Right.
And we have the power grid, and so we use them in the evening.
Right.
But this is then so the counter that runs in one direction when we produce energy, and on the night it runs in the other direction.
Right.
So we pay only the minimum wage for the power grids, and so this is, I think, maybe the next frontier from the building automation would be this autonomy. So that because today. Air conditioning is the greatest villain. You pay 67% of the bill for air conditioning.
Right.
And they have made this here in Brazil so that you can have solar cells on your roof, and you share with your brother, with your mother. You produce more energy you need, but you can use it in another facility. And then arises a different issue that is unpredicted. Everybody started we had 20 years ago only 1% of solar cells and wind, and now we have 11%. And the power distribution is not capable of transmit this energy. And so we have had blackouts last year, and because the energy that is produced by the smart grids cannot flow through the installed transmission lines. And now they are asking the people that have
the solar cells, the
solar we cannot shut down, but the windmills, they have to shut down. And these companies say we have invested a lot of money and we cannot use it. And so we have, this is always the short blanket problem. You
pull it up, your legs are.
And so we say, buildings that produce their own energy is the future. But the grid is not prepared for this. So you need to have now transmission lines. And the problem is the power of solar cells are not predictable. You have a cloud, you have rain, and no way. The ONS is a Brazilian the system that organizes the power flows. They try to say coal only the last solution, but they need coal because they cannot for a short time take the hydropower and make more energy. So this is it's a good problem, but it's a problem.
So I'm glad you brought that up about just talking in this about the project as well, because I had a conversation earlier on with Andre and a few other folks here, and I was telling them they were asking me about why they didn't ask. I explained why. I picked Brazil for a lot of the work we do with KLPD and with Greenole. And I explained that Brazil literally is one of the most technologically advanced countries when it comes to smart buildings. And a lot of people do not realize it. So everybody thinks the US is, in the US and Western world, they have the smartest buildings. And the fact of the matter is, I think part of it is Brazil got into automation at the time when DDC started coming in, and this was when digital direct control started coming in the late 90s and early 2000s. And because they got it, they adopted it quite a bit, and they adopted it fast. And by adopting it fast, I explained that even there are so many things that I see here in Brazil that is there on a day-to-day basis wherever you go. Like you go into a parking lot, and you would see exactly which spaces are open for you, right? And then you go from a parking lot, you walk in, and you go to the office, it's facial recognition, right? And you're able to go in. Even if you drive in the countryside and you go to a gas station with a small restaurant with 3 or 4 restaurants in there, when you walk in, you get a little key code thing.
True.
And then,
Yes.
and then you go to each of the counters. And these are all digital systems.
Yes. It's interesting to mention that the need make us more clever. And so, for example, we had in Brazil high inflation, 30% a month inflation. It was in the...
Wow.
And so the bank system in Brazil was the best in the world because you could not afford to let your money one day on the bank. You need to yes.
Yeah.
And so we started this PIX system. This is the pay.
Yes, the payment system, right?
Pay systems. And it's because, the bank systems, for example, when I was in Germany for the first time, I went to the bank and say, I like to give my money and I like to have an investment for 2 months. And the people laughed at me. They say, no, you here can only invest for 1 year and you become 1.5% for 1 year. Because when I went to Germany, the inflation here was 30% a month. And so you got your money for your salary. The first thing you buy everything you could because and so the bank system was so fast. Everything was automated.
Right.
The automation was the consequence of this fault we have with the inflation. It's interesting. For example, you go to a restaurant and you become everywhere you have this.
Right.
When I was in USA. And then I saw, they always have the bills. They write the bills.
I know. Isn't that crazy?
I think your necessity creates invention.
Yes, it does. It absolutely does. And as a result of the society being at that stage of innovation, at that stage of digitization, it's also easier to introduce new things, right? So some of the things that we've been asked to do, and I'm going to use Greenole as an example, that we've been asked to do has been quite interesting. For instance, we were approached by a vaccine manufacturer company, and we were tracking the temperatures of the eggs from the farms in the trucks, to ensure that it stays at a particular temperature.
The right temperature.
Because they are using the embryos for vaccines, right?
Yes, of course.
So
you need it.
you need it.
Yeah,
so
the quality is
something like that. It's the norm in some shopping malls in Brazil where we end up putting sensors at the door, right? And we use the sensors to count. So it's just a sensor that observes if the door opens or closes, right? So if the door opens 200 times, we know they've had 100 visitors.
Yes,
100
more or less.
out, right? Yeah, more or less. Yeah. And then we use that to determine when to go clean the bathroom. Because if you go to a shopping mall, the bathrooms close to where the food court is used more than the bathrooms in the other areas. So you don't have to go to every bathroom every hour to clean. You can just clean the ones in the food court area more frequently than the other ones. And we were able to save 20-30% of operational cost. And this operational costs were people operations, not even the building energy, right? And you can imagine that same format being applied at the airports. Because at the airport, some gates are used more frequently than others.
Yes.
So those bathrooms have to be cleaned more often. But what I'm getting at is, for me, it's amazing that Brazil is so far ahead in a lot of things. And I don't think a lot of people realize it. And I have, in my travels, I've realized, and I look at it and I say, wow, you said earlier on, KNX is being adopted quite a bit in the automation space. Why? Because it's able to do lighting, it's able to do blinds, it's able to do a whole bunch of other things,
Yes, but KNX in Brazil is still too expensive. I don't know how to
innovate, maybe
to fill the gap, but wireless is not so confident, or you have
because you have
trouble for this connection.
Yeah.
But if you make a typical project with KNX, then you have, for example, for a small home, I would say easily 10,000 reais.
Okay.
Yes. And if you buy from Mercado Livre, this from Sonoff from China, you can make the same for 1,000 reais. It's a factor 10. And so I say we need a middle. Not KNX is very good, but it's not for everyone.
Correct.
And the wireless is still unreliable.
Yep. I totally agree. Thank you everyone for joining us on this podcast. If you like the conversations we're having, please like, follow, make some comments. We'll engage with you. And once again, Professor Adolfo, thank you so much for being on this episode with me.
Happy to be here.
Yep. We will see you again very soon. Thank you.